The crisp autumn breeze swept across the sprawling green hills of Arlington, carrying with it the mournful, distant notes of a lone bugler playing taps. I stood frozen before the polished mahogany casket draped in the heavy, vibrant colors of the American flag, feeling entirely unworthy of his ultimate sacrifice. They tell you that time heals all wounds, but looking at that folded flag, I knew the shrapnel embedded in my soul would remain forever. He wasn't just a military working dog. Hero was the compass that finally pointed my shattered, aimless life toward a horizon worth marching toward. Before the Marine Corps, before the suffocating heat of Helmand province, I was just another ghost haunting the rusted, dying streets of an Ohio factory town. My days blurred into a meaningless loop of dead-end jobs, toxic arguments with my exhausted parents, and a profound, hollow silence echoing inside my chest. I remember standing on the cracked pavement of our driveway, staring at the grey, stagnant sky, knowing that if I stayed, I would simply fade away. There was no grand patriotic awakening that led me to the recruiter's office, only a desperate, clawing need to escape the gravity of my own failures. Boot camp was a brutal shock to the system, stripping away my civilian apathy and replacing it with the relentless, punishing rhythm of absolute military discipline. Yet, despite the physical transformation, the familiar, lingering shadows of my past still clung to me, whispering that I was destined to mess this up, too. My salvation didn't arrive in the form of a commendation medal or a perfectly executed drill, but in a chaotic, snarling bundle of teeth and fur. I was assigned to the K-9 unit at Camp Pendleton, placed under the stern, watchful eye of Sergeant Davis, a man who saw right through my defenses. He led me down a corridor of deafening barks to a reinforced kennel, where a massive German shepherd with a scarred snout paced with restless fury. "This is Hero," Sergeant Davis said, his voice cutting through the noise. "And he got just as much misplaced anger as you do, Private Miller." Hero looked at me with deep, intelligent eyes that mirrored my own brokenness, sensing immediately that neither of us knew how to trust the world anymore. Our first few weeks of training were an absolute battlefield of wills, consisting of snapped leashes, stubborn standoffs, and the painful process of breaking down mutual walls. Every time he lunged or refused a command, I saw my own chaotic defiance reflected back at me, challenging me to finally take responsibility for another life. It was in the quiet moments after sunset, sitting in the dusty training yard, that the true, unspoken language of our partnership began to take root. I would talk to him about my deep personal failures, pouring my heart out into the evening air, and he would rest his heavy, scarred head on my lap. In a world that demanded absolute perfection and unyielding strength, Hero was the only soul who accepted me completely, flawed, scarred, and desperately searching for a purpose. We landed in Helmand province, under a suffocating blanket of heat, the air thick with fine, choking dust, and the constant, distant rumble of artillery. Sergeant Davis wasted no time, immediately integrating Hero and me into the forward patrol units, tasked with clearing heavily mined roads for supply convoys. The infantry Marines looked at me with deep skepticism, doubting that a rookie handler and a formerly unstable rescue dog could keep them all alive. But the moment the leash clicked into place on that dusty Afghan road, Hero transformed into a hyper-focused, disciplined warrior entirely dedicated to the mission. We walked point, stepping carefully ahead of the armored vehicles, sweeping every inch of the treacherous dirt paths, where a single misstep meant absolute devastation. It was terrifying work, demanding absolute concentration while the oppressive desert sun beat down on my heavy tactical gear and completely soaked my uniform. Hero never faltered. His nose remained to the ground, sniffing through the metallic tang of blood and the pervasive scent of burning diesel fuel. During a particularly tense sweep through a narrow, mud-brick village, Hero suddenly stopped dead in his tracks, his ears pinned back in rigid alert. I immediately raised my fist to halt the patrol behind me, my heart hammering violently against my ribs as I read my partner's body language. He sat perfectly still, staring intently at a seemingly undisturbed patch of hard-packed earth just 3 feet ahead of our current exposed position. An explosive ordnance disposal team carefully moved forward, carefully brushing away the topsoil, to reveal a massive, deeply buried improvised explosive device wired to detonate. In that terrifying moment of realization, the skeptical grunts behind us finally understood that this scarred, unpredictable dog had just saved all our lives. That night, huddled together inside a cramped, sandbagged bunker, I shared my meager MRE rations with Hero while artillery illuminated the dark desert sky. I buried my face into his thick, dusty coat, realizing that the broken girl from Ohio had finally found a profound, undeniable sense of purpose. We became a legendary team among the infantry, successfully uncovering dozens of hidden weapon caches and safely clearing miles of deadly, explosive-laden supply routes. Sergeant Davis even pulled me aside after a grueling mission, offering a rare, solemn nod of approval that validated every ounce of our exhausting struggle. But the harsh reality of Helmand province is that it never lets you get comfortable. Violence there is a sudden, unpredictable storm waiting to strike. Back at Arlington, the sharp crack of the honor guard's rifle volley abruptly shatters my peaceful memories, violently pulling me back to the heartbreaking present. The smell of gunpowder from the ceremonial salute triggers a vivid, horrifying flashback to the deafening chaos of the day my entire world was shattered. I stand rigidly over his casket, fighting back tears as the memory of our final, fateful patrol in the dusty Afghan valley consumes my mind. The morning of our final mission began with an eerie, unnatural silence that settled heavily over the desolate expanse of the Helmand River Valley. Sergeant Davis gathered our platoon before dawn, his weathered face illuminated by the harsh red glow of a tactical flashlight as he outlined the objective. We were tasked with clearing a notorious, labyrinthine mud-brick village suspected of housing a massive insurgent weapons cache and an intricate network of explosives. I knelt in the fine, powdery dirt, double-checking the heavy carabiner attached to Hero's tactical vest, while my hands trembled with a strange, unshakable dread. Hero pressed his scarred snout firmly against my chest, his deep brown eyes holding my gaze as if he instinctively understood the gravity of today. We moved out just as the unforgiving desert sun crested the jagged mountains, casting long, distorted shadows across the seemingly abandoned, ruined village streets. The infantry marines fanned out behind us in a staggered tactical formation, their weapons raised and their eyes constantly scanning the crumbling, bullet-pocked rooftops. I gave Hero the command to search, watching with profound admiration as he immediately transitioned into a highly disciplined, methodical sweeping pattern across the dirt. The air was incredibly still, devoid of the usual ambient sounds of livestock or local villagers, amplifying the deafening crunch of our heavy combat boots. We navigated through a narrow, winding alleyway, flanked by towering mud walls that made me feel incredibly exposed and entirely trapped within a hostile maze. Hero suddenly slowed his pace, lowering his head and inhaling deeply as he caught the faint, metallic scent cone of buried ordnance drifting on the wind. He meticulously tracked the invisible odor, leading me toward a seemingly innocuous pile of discarded wooden crates stacked haphazardly against a crumbling structural support beam. Without hesitation, Hero sat perfectly still in front of the debris, rigidly pinning his ears back to signal the unmistakable presence of a hidden explosive. I immediately raised my fiats to halt the advancing column, pulling Hero back slightly to establish a safe perimeter for the explosive ordnance disposal technician. But as the technician stepped forward to inspect the primary device, a sudden, blinding flash of light erupted from the opposite side of the dusty alleyway. The deafening crack of a sniper rifle violently shattered the oppressive silence, instantly dropping the Marine standing just 3 feet to my immediate left. Absolute chaos erupted as heavy, sustained machine gun fire rained down upon our exposed position from multiple concealed vantage points along the elevated village rooftops. I scrambled desperately toward the flimsy cover of a ruined doorway, dragging Hero alongside me as bullets viciously chewed through the mud walls around us. Sergeant Davis barked frantic orders over the overwhelming roar of gunfire, desperately trying to organize a defensive perimeter while calling in immediate close air support. Pinned down in the suffocating dust and flying shrapnel, I realized with absolute horror that the buried explosive was merely a bait for this devastating ambush. The narrow alleyway transformed into an absolute meat grinder as unforgiving enemy fire chipped away at our rapidly crumbling mud brick cover. I pressed Hero down firmly against the dust, shielding his trembling body with my own tactical vest while deafening explosions rocked the ground. Sergeant Davis was shouting frantically into his radio, desperately requesting immediate close air support to suppress the heavily fortified enemy sniper positions. Through the suffocating haze of pulverized brick and smoke, I saw 2 of our Marines pinned down entirely, unable to effectively return fire. Hero whimpered softly, a sound that instantly cut through the chaotic roar of the battlefield and firmly anchored my spiraling, terrified mind. He wasn't trained for this level of relentless, static warfare. His instincts demanded forward movement, demanding to confront the invisible threats surrounding us. I gripped his collar tightly, whispering frantic promises that we would make it out, even as my own confidence rapidly bled away into nothing. Suddenly, the deafening screech of incoming mortar rounds tore through the air, followed immediately by a series of earth-shattering, violently destructive detonations. The ground heaved violently beneath us, throwing jagged shrapnel and blinding dust across the narrow corridor where we were desperately taking temporary shelter. I choked on the thick, acrid smoke, my ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that completely drowned out the desperate screaming around me. As the dense smoke momentarily cleared, a terrifying realization washed over me. The insurgent fighters were aggressively advancing on our severely compromised position. We were entirely cut off from the rest of the platoon, trapped in a shrinking perimeter with our ammunition supplies rapidly dwindling away. Sergeant Davis tossed a green smoke grenade into the open street, creating a temporary, opaque, visual barrier to mask our desperate tactical withdrawal. He roared with absolute authority, waving us frantically toward a reinforced, seemingly safer structure sitting 50 perilous yards down the shattered alleyway. I scrambled quickly to my feet, my legs heavy with adrenaline and terror, pulling Hero's leash as we sprinted blindly into the thick smoke. Bullets snapped viciously past my head, sounding like angry hornets, violently kicking up plumes of dirt, just inches from my desperately running boots. Hero stayed perfectly glued to my side, flawlessly matching my frantic stride, his immense training completely overriding his natural canine instinct to scatter. We threw ourselves violently through the shattered wooden doorway of the compound, crashing hard onto the debris-littered floor just as the walls exploded. I dragged myself and Hero deeper into the shadows of the ruined room, gasping for air while clutching my rifle with white-knuckled desperation. We had momentarily survived the deadly gauntlet, but the deafening footsteps echoing outside quickly confirmed the terrifying truth: the enemy was hunting us. We huddled in the suffocating darkness of that ruined compound, listening to the terrifying, deliberate crunch of enemy boots slowly encircling our fragile sanctuary. My hands shook violently as I checked my last remaining magazine, the stark reality of our impending death settling heavily in my chest. I looked down at Hero, expecting to see the same paralyzing terror reflected in his eyes, but found only a steady, unwavering calm. He didn't understand geopolitics or military strategy. His entire universe was simply the person holding the other end of that heavy nylon leash. In the deafening silence between gunfire, he pressed his scarred snout firmly into my trembling palm, anchoring my shattered nerves to the present moment. Standing here today, surrounded by these pristine white headstones, I finally understand that true courage isn't the romanticized absence of paralyzing human fear. It is the brutal, agonizing choice to stand your ground and protect the soul beside you, even when every instinct screams at you to run. Hero taught me that profound truth in the darkest, most terrifying corner of Helmand province, where loyalty was measured entirely in blood and sacrifice. The brief illusion of safety shattered instantly as the heavy wooden door of our compound was violently kicked open by an aggressive insurgent fighter. Sergeant Davis immediately unleashed a deafening volley of suppressive fire, his assault rifle illuminating the dusty, claustrophobic room with brilliant, blinding muzzle flashes. The enemy returned fire with terrifying intensity, their bullets mercilessly tearing through the crumbling mud walls and showering us with jagged, blinding debris. I fired blindly into the thick, swirling smoke, the heavy recoil of my weapon bruising my shoulder as I desperately tried to hold the line. But there were simply too many of them, heavily armed and aggressively advancing through the ruined courtyard with absolute, overwhelming lethal force. Through the chaotic haze of combat, I saw a metallic cylinder arc gracefully through the shattered window, landing with a sickening thud nearby. A live fragmentation grenade spun wildly on the dirt floor, coming to a dead stop less than 5 feet from my desperately huddled position. Time seemed to stretch into an agonizing crawl, the frantic screaming of my squad completely drowned out by the pounding of my own heartbeat. I was entirely frozen by absolute terror, my exhausted muscles completely refusing the desperate, frantic commands of my screaming, panicked brain to move. There was no cover left to dive behind, nowhere to escape the impending shockwave that was about to violently end my fragile life. In that terrifying fraction of a second, I closed my eyes tightly, completely surrendering to the inevitable, explosive darkness waiting to claim me. But Hero didn't hesitate or cower. He forcefully ripped the heavy leash from my weakened grip, his powerful muscles coiling for a desperate lunge. In a breathtaking display of raw, instinctual loyalty, Hero lunged forward with explosive speed, placing his massive body directly between me and the lethal fragmentation grenade. The deafening detonation tore through the cramped mud brick room, a horrifying shockwave of blinding fire and jagged steel that violently lifted me entirely off the ground. I was slammed mercilessly against the far wall, my vision instantly dissolving into a chaotic, spinning blur of choking grey dust and agonizing, ringing silence. Time fractured into disjointed, slow-motion fragments as the crumbling ceiling rained heavy debris down upon my paralyzed body, burying me in the suffocating Afghan dirt. When my shattered senses finally began to claw their way back to reality, the overwhelming smell of copper and burnt hair violently assaulted my lungs. Through the thick, swirling haze of the aftermath, I could vaguely see Sergeant Davis dragging my limp body backward toward the shattered doorway of the compound. My ears bled, and every nerve in my body screamed in agonizing protest. But my panicked mind was entirely consumed by a single, desperate thought. I fought weakly against the strong hands pulling me to safety, my hoarse, cracked voice crying out for hero over the chaotic din of returning gunfire. I found him lying motionless in the settling dust, his heavy tactical vest completely shredded by the merciless shrapnel that was meant to tear through me. I crawled desperately across the blood-stained rubble, entirely ignoring the agonizing pain in my own shattered ribs as I collapsed beside his broken, bleeding body. His breathing was incredibly shallow and ragged, a horrific, wet rattling sound that immediately told me the devastating extent of his catastrophic internal injuries. I tore off my heavy combat gloves with trembling hands, pressing my bare palms desperately against his deep wounds in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. He slowly opened his beautiful, intelligent eyes, looking at me not with the terror of a dying animal, but with the profound calmness of a protector. Even as his lifeblood soaked rapidly into the thirsty desert sand, he managed to weakly lift his heavy, scarred head to lick my tear-streaked face. I buried my face into his ruined neck, sobbing uncontrollably into his thick fur, while begging him to hold on just a little bit longer. The thunderous roar of an incoming medevac helicopter finally vibrated through the ground, its massive rotors aggressively whipping the thick smoke away from our besieged position. Marines swarmed into the ruined courtyard to secure the landing zone, laying down a punishing wall of suppressive fire to keep the advancing insurgents at bay. A frantic Navy corpsman dropped heavily to his knees beside us, his experienced hands moving rapidly as he tried to assess Hero's massive, fatal trauma. But as the young medic looked up and met my desperate, pleading gaze, the heartbreaking truth was already written clearly across his soot-stained face. There would be no miraculous recovery, no heroic return to the sun-drenched training yards of California. My best friend was bleeding out in my arms. I don't remember the exact moment his massive heart finally stopped beating beneath my blood-soaked, trembling hands. I only remember the agonizing, surreal weight of his lifeless body as Sergeant Davis and I carried him into the deafening belly of the medevac helicopter. The desperate flight back to Camp Leatherneck was a chaotic, terrifying blur of flashing red emergency lights and the frantic shouts of flight medics. They worked aggressively to stabilize my own shattered ribs and severely concussed skull, but I couldn't feel anything except a profound, bottomless void. I stared blankly at the vibrating metal floor of the Black Hawk, entirely hollowed out as I watched Hero's blood mingle with my own. When we finally touched down on the secure tarmac, the harsh, glaring reality of war stripped away any remaining illusions of patriotic glory. They took him away on a sterile, cold metal gurney, a devastatingly unceremonious end for a fierce warrior who had just saved our entire squad. I was heavily sedated and immediately medically evacuated to Germany, plunging into a dark, suffocating abyss of medically induced sleep and recurring, violent nightmares. In my feverish dreams, I was perpetually trapped in that crumbling mud brick alleyway, choking on thick grey dust, and reaching out for a leash I could no longer hold. I woke up weeks later in a painfully bright, sterile hospital room at Walter Reed, hooked up to a complex labyrinth of beeping monitors and IV tubes. The ensuing physical rehabilitation was absolute torture, forcing my violently battered muscles and shattered bones to painstakingly relearn the basic mechanics of human movement. But the true, unrelenting agony wasn't the grueling physical therapy. It was the deafening, agonizing silence of a sterile room devoid of his heavy, rhythmic breathing. Every time the heavy hospital door swung open, my deeply ingrained combat instincts expected to hear the familiar, comforting click of his paws on the polished linoleum. Instead, I was met with sympathetic nurses and visiting officers, their pitying glances a constant, unbearable reminder of the colossal piece of my soul I had left in the desert. Sergeant Davis visited me just days before his next deployment, standing rigidly at the foot of my hospital bed with his cover held tightly in his hands. He didn't offer any hollow platitudes or empty civilian comfort. He simply reached into his pocket and placed Hero's tarnished metal dog tags into my scarred palm. He did exactly what he was trained to do, Corporal, Davis whispered, his seasoned, authoritative voice cracking with an uncharacteristic, heavy sorrow. I clutched the cold, blood-stained metal tags fiercely to my chest, the sharp edges digging into my skin as a massive dam of unprocessed grief finally shattered completely. I wept uncontrollably until my fractured ribs screamed in absolute protest, mourning the fierce, unwavering protector who had single-handedly salvaged my broken life. Looking out at the sea of crisp military uniforms today, I wear these heavy medals on my chest, knowing with absolute certainty that they belong entirely to him. Returning to Ohio after my medical discharge felt like stepping onto an alien planet that had completely forgotten how to speak my language. The rusted factories and cracked asphalt of my hometown were exactly the same, but the girl walking those familiar streets was entirely unrecognizable. My parents tried their absolute best to welcome their wounded daughter home, but their cautious, hesitant smiles only amplified the deafening, awkward silence. I spent my sleepless nights staring blankly at the peeling ceiling of my childhood bedroom, entirely paralyzed by the massive weight of survivor's guilt. Without the rigid discipline of the Marine Corps or the heavy, comforting presence of my canine partner, I was rapidly spiraling back into darkness. Every sudden noise in the civilian world, from a slamming car door to a dropping book, sent my traumatized mind racing back to Helmand. I found myself subconsciously reaching down to my left side, my empty fingers instinctively searching for a thick nylon leash that simply wasn't there. My mother found me sitting alone on the neglected front porch one evening, tears silently streaming down my scarred and profoundly exhausted face. She didn't offer any useless advice or demand that I immediately snap out of it. She simply wrapped her trembling arms tightly around my shoulders. In that rare moment of genuine maternal comfort, my father quietly stepped outside, gently placing a faded photograph of Hero onto my trembling lap. Staring at that captured memory of my brave partner, I suddenly realized that allowing my life to crumble would completely dishonor his ultimate sacrifice. He didn't violently throw his massive body onto a live fragmentation grenade just so I could slowly rot away in a forgotten Ohio bedroom. Hero gave up his own future so that I could have the extraordinary privilege of actually living mine with purpose, courage, and unwavering resilience. The jagged shrapnel scars permanently etched into my skin are not just a bitter reminder of war, but a profound testament to his love. Slowly, agonizingly, I began to painstakingly rebuild my shattered life, carrying his fierce, undeniable spirit within my heart every single step of the way. I started working with other disabled veterans, channeling my overwhelming grief into a relentless, driving passion to help those carrying their own invisible wounds. Every time I guide a struggling soldier through their darkest moments, I am actively honoring the magnificent dog who once did the exact same for me. Standing before this gathered crowd of brave Marines today, I am no longer the lost, angry civilian girl staring aimlessly at a bleak sky. I am a proud survivor, forged in the horrific fires of combat and beautifully saved by the purest, most unconditional love I have ever known. The military honors him with beautifully folded flags and polished medals, but his true, lasting legacy beats fiercely inside my deeply grateful, healing chest. I step away from the heavy wooden podium, my tear-streaked face turning back toward the pristine mahogany casket resting peacefully in the morning mist. The vast sea of gathered Marines stands in absolute, reverent silence, their eyes fixed respectfully on the final resting place of a true warrior. I look down at the vibrant colors of the American flag draped over him, the bright fabric a stark contrast to the dust of Helmand. He was never just a military asset or a piece of tactical equipment. He was a fiercely loyal soul who ultimately saved my own. The highly disciplined USMC Honor Guard slowly steps forward in perfect, synchronized unison, positioning themselves carefully around the four corners of the draped casket. With practiced, meticulous precision, they gently lift the heavy flag from the polished wood, pulling the fabric taut between their stark white ceremonial gloves. They begin the solemn, rhythmic process of folding the fabric, every deliberate movement serving as a silent testament to honor, duty, and immense sacrifice. I watch the vibrant red and white stripes slowly disappear, folded carefully away until only the deep blue field of bright white stars remains. The flag is meticulously tucked into a crisp, perfect triangle, a heavy symbol of a completed journey, and a remarkably brave life violently cut short. Sergeant Davis steps forward with profound solemnity, his seasoned face completely unreadable, as he gently takes the folded flag from the lead honor guard. He turns slowly, executing a sharp, flawless military pivot before walking deliberately toward me, the heavy folded triangle resting perfectly in his white-gloved hands. He stops directly in front of me, his dark eyes brimming with an unspoken, shared sorrow as he slowly extends the folded flag forward. On behalf of the President of the United States and the United States Marine Corps, he whispers, his authoritative voice thick with raw emotion. Please accept this flag, as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service, he concludes. Holding my steady gaze, I slowly reach out with trembling hands, accepting the heavy, tightly folded fabric, pressing it firmly against my chest directly over my beating heart. The final, mournful note of taps slowly fades away across the sprawling green hills, completely swallowed by the gentle, whispering breeze of the cemetery. I take one final, slow step toward the bare mahogany casket, the polished wood gleaming softly under the hazy, diffused morning sunlight of Arlington. I gently rest my white-gloved hand against the cool, hard surface, silently whispering a final, fiercely private promise to the best partner I ever had. Taking a deliberate step backward, I straighten my spine, completely burying my profound grief beneath the rigid, uncompromising discipline of the United States Marine Corps. I slowly raise my right hand to the brim of my white cover, executing the sharpest, most meaningful military salute of my entire life. As I hold this final, unwavering salute, the profound weight of the folded flag pressed against my chest feels like a massive, beating heart. The deep silence of Arlington Cemetery is no longer a suffocating void, but a peaceful, hallowed space filled entirely with his undeniable, fierce spirit. I lower my trembling hand, the crisp fabric of my uniform rustling softly in the cool, gentle morning breeze sweeping across the green hills. Turning away from the polished mahogany casket is undeniably the hardest, most agonizing physical movement I have ever had to make in my life. But as I slowly walk down the narrow, paved path between the endless rows of white marble headstones, I am absolutely not walking alone. The phantom weight of a heavy nylon leash still rests securely in my left hand, a permanent, invisible tether to the partner I lost. Sergeant Davis waits quietly by the cemetery gates, his seasoned eyes reflecting a deep, mutual understanding of the immense, irreplaceable sacrifice we both witnessed. We exchange a brief, solemn nod, an unspoken military acknowledgement that the grueling, emotional war we fought together will truly never leave our souls. Leaving the sacred grounds of Arlington, I carry his memory forward into a civilian world that desperately needs the unwavering resilience he taught me. The broken, aimless girl from Ohio completely died in that dusty Afghan alleyway, permanently replaced by a fiercely determined survivor forged in profound grief. Every single morning, I wake up and choose to fight for another veteran's life. I am directly honoring the magnificent dog who saved mine. He gave me the extraordinary gift of a second chance, a beautifully fragile opportunity to build a life entirely worthy of his ultimate sacrifice. When the dark, suffocating shadows of trauma threaten to overwhelm my mind, I simply close my eyes and vividly remember his calm, steady gaze. I feel the phantom pressure of his scarred, heavy snout resting gently in my trembling palm, instantly grounding me back into the present moment. His name was Hero, a title he earned not through complex human politics, but through the purest, most instinctual display of absolute, unconditional love. He rests now among the greatest, bravest warriors our nation has ever produced, sleeping peacefully beneath the crisp, white stars of the American flag. But his fierce, unyielding soul continues to march relentlessly beside me, forever guiding my footsteps through the difficult, ongoing battles of my civilian life. The war may be officially over, and the deafening guns may have finally fallen silent, but our profound, unbreakable mission together is just beginning. I look up at the vast, limitless blue sky, feeling the warm sunlight gracefully illuminate the jagged, faded shrapnel scar on my right temple. Semper Fidelis, my brave, beautiful partner, I will carry your magnificent light forward into the world until the very day we finally meet again.